Hello everyone and welcome back to another react on the channel. Here today we are reacting to some Warhammer 40k lore slash timeline of business. I checked out some Warframe stuff a while ago and I wanted to check out some Warhammer stuff. Just these big games that I literally know nothing about and just a little curious, just wanting to little bit of dip my toes in the water, see what's going on over here. So let's just get right into it and check out this video. I will link it below as well if you want to check out the original. But thank you so much for watching and let's get into it. All right, let's see what this is all about. What?
Hi, friends.
Hi.
Warhammer is my favorite setting of all time. Duh. And I also think 40k is one of the greatest hobbies of all time. However, let's be honest, it's probably the most intimidating setting to get into, right behind the setting of any place with a cute girl to talk to. But luckily, you have me for the Warhammer, not the girls. But I'm just a silly little guy who'll help you get your foot in the door and explain all the basics that you need to know to get into the expansive lore of 40k.
Okay.
You're welcome. Also, if you're already familiar with the lore, you should still watch because that would just be really nice. Thanks. Anyways,
I'm not familiar.
It all started much like our own universe with the Big Bang and birth of the universe. Mostly because it is our universe, just with magic space lizards and stuff. Speaking of, a long time ago in a galaxy that's this one, magic space lizards called the Old Ones roamed the galaxy and created new species and planted the seeds of life on planets as they traveled the cosmos.
Okay.
Around this time, another species called the Necrontyr was beginning to gain prominence as well, but this progress was slowed due to a little affliction they had called super cancer, caused because our crappy planet's dumbass sun is a deadly laser.
Unfortunate.
But despite their woes, eventually these dudes did create spacecraft and interstellar travel. But it sucked ass compared to the old ones.
Trash
but
compared
one
to
day,
No, don't call it trash.
they did happen upon the old ones and were amazed by their incredible tech, unrivaled power, and vast wisdom.
A Disney cruise?
So, naturally, Make-A-Wish Kid, the race, asked the old ones to help with their struggles.
But
unlike John Cena, the old ones declined their wish. Which might seem mean, but also, the old ones either couldn't help since the Necrontyr had some form of magic space cancer that was inherently tied to their species, or they didn't want to help because the Necrontyr were an evil-ass warmongering species of jerks, so giving them immortality may not have been the best idea from a species that values all life. Anyways, the Necrontyr obviously didn't like this, and thus began the War in Heaven! Which is a topic in and of itself, but long story short, the Necrontyr found some star gods even older than the old ones, old ones if you will, made them bodies to talk to, allied with them since they promised the Necrontyr immortality. Yippee! Then they made the Necrontyr into soulless robot slaves. Not yippee, but also gave them the power to actually fight the old ones without getting instantly crushed. Yippee!
Yippee!
And the Necrons and the old ones had the craziest, most insane war in the galaxy ever. I know you've seen images like this and went, oh yeah, wow, that's pretty crazy insano. Well, the War in Heaven makes that look like two babies fighting over a cookie. The old ones made species to aid their war effort, most notably being the Psychic Eldar and the powerful Krorks. And they seemed to be winning until some funny guys called the Enslavers started killing everyone. You see, in Warhammer, there's this little thing called the Warp, which is essentially a mirror dimension to real space, and in the time of the old ones, it was unpredictable and potentially treacherous, but like in the way the ocean is. It wasn't evil or malicious, it just had choppy waters and the occasional tsunami or something. But since the warp mirrors the galaxy's emotions and feelings, a literal galaxy-spanning war of divine proportions started to make the warp actually evil and malicious, to the point that it gave birth to some evil-ass monsters. So now your ocean has sea monsters, and some of those sea monsters have legs and will come into your galaxy and eat you. This upset allowed the Catan and the Necrons to gain the upper hand and exterminate the old ones, finally winning the War in Heaven! And all it costed was their souls, free will, and all the pleasures of life. Then, sometime after the War in Heaven, the leader of the Necrons, Zarek the Silent King, led a rebellion and shattered the Catan into shards, which the Necrons promptly enslaved and used in their super weapons. But after defeating two god species, the Necrons were a bit tuckered out, and the old ones' new species were beginning to get scary. So, the Silent King relinquished his control of the species and initiated the Great Sleep as his last order before leaving the galaxy for some possibly literal soul searching. The Great Sleep was enacted so that the Necrons could sleep past the blossoming new species peaks, recover their strength, and then exterminate them later to reclaim the galaxy once again. So, with the Necrons sleeping, just like how there are a ton of AK 47s lying around after the USSR died, there are a bunch of Eldar laying around after the old ones died. Except these AK 47s had feelings. A lot of
Oh,
feelings. And also,
big
genitals.
feelings. Oh,
The Eldar gained dominion of the galaxy, culled the warlike Krorks, and created the greatest empire the galaxy has ever seen.
yo!
Then, fast forward approximately 60 million years, and a little species of primate evolved on a little blue planet
Huh,
called Earth.
that's
For
right.
this section, read this book or any similar one for relevant lore on them. But a few thousand years after that lore book, humanity developed space travel and began to
Mm,
colonize the solar system. Then
wow.
the humans develop even better space travel and leaves the solar system to colonize the galaxy, bringing on a new era of incredible scientific and technological progress, retroactively called the Dark Age of Technology.
Whoa.
This was the pinnacle of humanity and was
Why
an era
dark?
defined by prosperity and progress as humanity began their journey to control the stars. The most notable human inventions of this
Why do we have to
time were
control
the AI
everything?
Men of Iron, unparalleled genetic editing techniques, and warp travel. In this
Whoa.
era, the
We
Dark
warping?
Age of technology, humans were masters of gene editing and created subspecies, notably the navigators and squats. With the navigator gene, warp travel was invented as a form of faster than light travel. Warp travel is
Nice.
achieved by tearing a hole in reality to enter the warp. This is useful because in the warp there is
That
no
wouldn't
regular flow of time or space, so you can
have
essentially
any
skip across a
problems.
galaxy with skilled navigators. The warp will be important again, so keep it in mind. But
Okay.
all good things come
Noted,
to an
noted.
end, and across the galaxy in the Eldar Empire, having long reached their societal peak with no struggles, the aforementioned extreme feelings and genitals started to become an issue as they started a near species wide age of decadence and degeneracy. Since the Eldar have
Oh,
such
dear.
intense emotions, their actions and powerful feelings began to negatively affect the warp. So, the warp was beginning
Oh.
to get evil and wacko again, and part of this was a huge psychic awakening among the galaxy species, most notably humanity. At
Oh.
first, this was cool wizard shit, but eventually it became problematic as the Eldar continued to mess up the warp, and demonic incursions began to plague humanity, and psychic wars destroyed many great
Oh,
civilizations.
dear.
And to make matters even worse, humanity's advanced AI Men of Iron began a revolt.
Oh,
Unlike
of
our world, where AI is mostly
course.
just garbage slop content, companies cheaping out, and pathetic products for losers. Seriously, who the fuck needs an AI girlfriend? Get a life, dude. AI in 40k was actually cool robot dudes and helpful beings, but most of these men of iron eventually believed themselves to be superior to their creators, potentially due to the
Yes.
warp or perhaps just AI ego, and they led a cybernetic
AI
revolt.
ego.
This apocalyptic war featured insano war machines on both sides and nearly
Alright, hang
annihilated
on.
humanity,
Fix it.
but they were eventually able to
Oh!
defeat the AI at great cost. All AI was banned in humanity, and all the men of iron were exterminated.
How much you wanna bet in, like, 100 years that's gonna be real life?
After this revolt and the growing warp storms, humanity was ravaged and shattered, ending their age of technology and leading to the Age of Strife. The Age of Strife was predictably defined by strife as the now mostly isolated human colonies separately developed and a number of wars began. Humanity fought demons, xenos, and other
Whoa!
humans. Most importantly, though, on Terra, humanity broke into clans of techno barbarians led by great warlords. These techno barbarians constantly fought in a sort of clash of clans, but one
Why
warlord
can't they
would
just
rise
rave
above
together,
all
man?
and begin to unify humanity once more. A little guy known as the Emperor would
Oh!
finally reveal himself and his legion of genetic super soldiers known as the Thunder Warriors. With his Thunder
Oh.
Warriors and Custody legions, the Emperor would begin the Unification Wars. Meanwhile,
That
the Elder
sounds
Empire had
pleasant.
finally reached a breaking point in which their excessive ways became so excessively excessive, it gave birth to Slanesh, the literal god of excess, and she devoured most of the Eldar, save for the Craft Worlds, Exodites, and some other small remnants. This
Dang.
caused even more warp chaos, since the Chaos God ranks went up by a beefy 33%. But the
Ah.
Emperor foresaw the birth of Slanesh, and he sought to conquer and reunite Terra under his new Imperium of Man. While his unification wars waged, he began developing his next genetic soldiers, the Space Marines.
Because we
While the
haven't learned
Marines were
that that
slightly physically inferior
will
to the
not go
Thunder
well
Warriors, the
before.
Thunder Warriors were too unstable and savage to fit the Emperor's plans. So,
Not
to
crazy,
provide gene seed
usually.
and to lead his
Most
armies,
of the
he would
time.
make 20 Primarchs, which was actually 21
21?
due to the magic of twins. But anyways, the Primarchs were born of warp magic and genetic sorcery to be the Emperor's most powerful warriors. However, his
Okay.
lab partner Erda, and technically the mother of the Primarchs, scattered the Primarchs
Oh.
across the galaxy because she feared the life that the Emperor would make them have.
Oh.
Or, there's also a cool little theory that the Emperor himself scattered the Primarchs and then blamed Erda for some big scheme of his. Luckily for him,
Wow.
though, even with the Primarchs scattered, the Emperor was still able to develop the Astartes. But without them, there were some legions that developed gene seed mutations and other weird things. But anyways, about
Okay.
a century after making the Space Marines, he had the Custodes and Space Marine First Legion eliminate
Dang.
the Thunder
Got
Warriors.
bonked.
Most notably out Mount Ararat, and later the Palace Coup, marking the end of the Unification Wars as he now had dominion of Terra. With the unified
Yippee!
Terra, he began to enact his grand plan to destroy chaos. Key parts of this plan were to create an imperial version of the old one's webway, which would eliminate the need for warp travel, and to
Okay.
abolish all religion, as well as making it clear that he
Oh.
was not a god. These would theoretically weaken the chaos gods enough to create a new golden age free of warp taint. And
Okay.
from there, he would launch a great crusade to unify the rest of humanity. He first
Yeah.
conquered the moon and allied with the Mechanicus of Mars to
Hey,
supply
don't
his
conquer
armies
my
with the
house.
equipment and vehicles needed. Throughout the crusade, he slowly reunited with his sons and he recruited them to his cause.
Cute.
And, luckily for him, most of the Primarchs gained rule of their worlds or even systems, making those freebies for the Emperor's conquest. One of the first Primarchs he came across was the 16th Primarch, Horus Lupercal. And Horus proved to be the best Primarch of all, and the Emperor's favorite. Horus was not only a great warrior, but he was an extremely charismatic leader and skilled tactician. He
Wow.
was one of the most successful Primarchs in all of their conquests. He was wholly
Okay.
devoted to the Emperor,
I
and he
love
was one of the
that.
few Primarchs to be almost universally respected among his brothers. Due to
Aw.
this, the Emperor would eventually crown Horus War Master, taking the Emperor's place leading the Great Crusade so that the Emperor could focus on developing his secret webway project. And this was great.
Oh.
Horus was the obvious pick for War Master, and he did a great job. Then, sometime after that, the Primarchs and the Emperor held the Counts of Nicaea, which resulted in the banning of the use of psychic powers. This will be
Right.
important later, so keep it in mind.
Okay,
Also
noted,
important
noted.
is that the Primarch Lorgar wrote the Lucidio Divinitatis, which declared the Emperor a god.
Oh,
Which, if you're paying attention,
that was
is
not.
literally against everything that the
Yeah,
Emperor
that's
stands
not what he
for, so
wanted.
he banned Lorgar from worshipping
Banned.
him.
Mods.
But
Grab
you
his
know what
balls.
they say, worshippers gonna worship on a warship. And on the planet Acadia, Lorgar met a demon prince who convinced Lorgar to join Chaos and betray the Emperor.
Join
After doing
chaos.
so, he genocided the
Oh.
Cadians to cover his tracks, and the planet was later
What?
recolonized by loyalist Imperials. Then, unfortunately, one day Horus would get mortally wounded by an
Oh.
evil ass dagger, gifted to a rebel leader by the son of Lorgar, Erebus, everyone's favorite little guy.
No.
After being wounded, Horus made a pact with mysterious dark powers to survive his wound, officially beginning his
Eh.
fall. Magnus, being a powerful psyker, foresaw Horus's heresy and set out to tell the Emperor. The fastest way to alert his father was to, quote, do nothing wrong and astrally project himself to Terra against the Emperor's express orders not to use psyker powers under
Eek.
any circumstance whatsoever. Before even reaching the Emperor, though, Magnus would encounter a powerful psychic barrier, and in his desperation, he accepted the help of a mysterious entity to break through the barrier to
Oh,
alert
Lord.
the Emperor. But that was a trick from the god of tricks, Zeech, and breaking the barrier allowed a
No.
demonic incursion to destroy the Emperor's webway project, essentially dooming humanity. And for 10 years,
Lord.
the Custodes and Solar Forces fought the demons off in the war in the webway. Meanwhile, the Emperor sent Leman Russ to bring Magnus back to Terra for his transgressions. And along the way, Horus would tell Russ that the Emperor had ordered him to change Leman's orders to kill Magnus instead of detaining him. People say Leman was dumb for this, but he really had no reason to doubt it considering that Horus was War Master, and at this point he had no reason to believe him a traitor. Plus, he hated that Magnus was so arrogant with the warp, so he happily obliged.
Okay.
So, at the burning of Prospero, Magnus and his 1,000 sons were thoroughly beaten by the wolves, and Rush
No.
shattered Magnus, which concretely aligned Magnus with Chaos as Tzeentch pulled him
Uh-oh.
and his legion into the warp. Soon after, Horus launched the Horus Heresy at Isstvan III, killing the loyalists among his legion, the Death Guard, World Eaters, and Emperor's children. Fortunately, loyalist Death Guard Nathaniel Garo was able to escape and warn Terra of the betrayal,
Go,
causing
Nathaniel!
a retaliation force to be sent by Dorn to intercept Horus on Istvan V. Nearly all of the Salamanders, Raven Guard, Word Bearers, Night Lords, Alpha Legion, Iron Warriors, and Iron Hands were sent to the planet. After
Okay.
some fierce
Big
fighting,
fight?
the Word Bearers, Night Lords, Alpha Legion, and Iron Warriors revealed that they too were traitors and ambushed the 3 loyalist
So many
legions,
traitors,
killing
bro.
Ferrus Manus and nearly wiping out all 3 of the legions. This was crucial to Horus's efforts as the loyalist forces were essentially down 3 legions, and when he was War Master, Horus also diverted the best gear and resources to his allied traitors. This meant that the smaller traitor force was able to even the odds and gain valuable allies like half of the Mechanicus to wage war on the Imperium. So then, the Horus Heresy happened. Lots of Space Marine battles and Primarch drama, yada yada. This
Yada,
all
yada.
culminated
Blah,
in
blah,
the
blah, blah,
fateful Siege of Terra. As the Terran forces clashed with the Traitor Legion and Demon Hordes, the Emperor, Dorn, and Sanguinius teleported onto Horus's flagship to kill him once and for all. Here, Sanguinius was brutally killed by Horus, and the Emperor dueled his son. Horus had the power of all 4
wins?
Chaos Gods coursing through his veins, and he mortally wounded the Emperor.
No!
But the Emperor blasted Horus with a giant psychic attack that deleted his soul and earned the Imperium a Pyrrhic victory.
Yo.
Dorn brought the fatally wounded Emperor to Terra and put him on the Golden Throne to keep him alive, light the
Life
Astronomicon,
support.
and keep the demons at bay. The Emperor was technically alive, but he might as well have been dead as he was essentially a big psychic battery for the throne. Once Horus was
Dang.
vanquished, though, the Ultramarines and Dark Angels arrived in the system, and with their huge armies, they were able to beat back the remaining traitors. Then, Guilliman took control of the Imperium, enacted crucial changes to prevent another heresy of large scale, came into conflict with some of his brothers, most notably Dorn, due to said changes, but Dorn eventually relented as he didn't want a second civil war. Meanwhile, the
Fair,
traitors
fair.
scattered and broke into warbands due to a lack of leadership and infighting. Additionally, the traitor Primarchs retreated into the warp, and the loyalist ones also went off someplace one by one, including Guilliman getting mortally wounded by a demon
no,
fulcrum
not
and
again!
put into stasis. And so,
How
with
many
the
sons have
Emperor
died now out of the
essentially dead
21?
and most of Primarchs gone, just like how George Washington's final wish was for America to not make political parties, and they honored their legendary leader by immediately ignoring that, the Imperium honored their legendary leader by immediately ignoring his wishes and creating the Imperial cult based
That's
on
crazy,
Lorgar's
bro.
Licidio Divinatus, and worshiping the Emperor as a god and martyr, setting the Imperium on its path of stagnation and decline. And then after that, the Battle of Fang, War of the Beast, Age of Apostasy, yada yada. A bunch of relatively
blah, blah, blah.
unimportant filler to get us to our favorite setting ever Warhammer 40k.
Yeah!
Woo! Warhammer is a lot cooler than 30k because we got aliens, baby. Whoa!
No
I mean, 30k also had aliens, but there were non-threat side characters after the triumph of Olinor. But anyways, by this time, the galaxy is just crazy style, with endless wars going on all over the place.
That's
Along
crazy.
with the threat of chaos, the Orcs regained prominence, the Eldar occasionally waged wars, the Tau Empire formed, the Tyranids were attracted to the galaxy, and the Necrons finally began to wake up again. The
Oh,
perfect
they're
setting
waking
for a
up.
war game, with factions constantly fighting and doomed to a slow decline.
Wake up!
And then, one
the
fateful
first
day,
ever.
Abaddon finally destroyed Cadia, which had since become the second most important Imperial world
No,
after Terra,
Cadia.
since it defended the gate of the Eye of Terror from the constant Chaos forces leaking out for 10,000 years. By destroying Cadia,
evil
the
forces
Eye
are
of
gonna
Terror
leak
was able
out,
to split the
bro.
galaxy asunder with the Great Rift, spelling a new age of grim darkness and the Imperium's inevitable doom. Oh, except luckily the Imperiums were able to revive Rabute Gilliman from his being dead nap, and right before he died, he luckily commissioned a giant legion of Primaris Marines who are the biggest, bestest, most powerful Marines ever. And
Hell
they were
yeah.
able to fight back chaos, and good old Brother the Lion also woke up from his little nap a little bit later
The
to wreck ass an
lion wakes
Imperium
up
Nihilist.
tonight.
And you can rest assured that probably all the Primarchs will come back and earn $1 billion and start Horus Heresy Part 2. Because
No,
people seem to want that for some
I don't
reason.
like
But
horror.
yeah, that's the basics, and all you need to know to get into the lore of the greatest setting of all time, Warhammer 40k. Let me know what you
Yeah.
thought in the comments below, and I hope this video can help people get their foot into this amazing hobby.
Okay, well, that was the Warhammer 40k lore. Well, I guess the lore leading up to Warhammer 40k, so the Warhammer 30k lore, I guess. But that was a lot of information. I feel like my brain melted a little bit, but I got the gist of it. There was the emperor, and he was like, "Yo, let's be fucking cool, everybody. Let's just be cool. Let's not do this and not do this because it's just gonna create bad people." And then people kept doing it, even his own sons. And then he was like, "Shit, this sucks, man." And then he died, and then he's on the throne dead, and yeah. I don't know. But like the Warframe video, if you guys have any comments you want to leave about like what the gameplay is like or anything like that, or anything you want to share with me about your Warhammer experience, please do so in the comments below. If you enjoyed, make sure you leave a like, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.